Why do people having public meltdowns so often take off all their clothes? Especially in airports and planes. Is it drugs? Mental illness? And is it as common as it feels? Or is it a rare event that's blown out of proportion on social media? The elephant in the room is this. People get naked during public meltdowns. It's definitely a thing, but why? Look, it certainly gets our attention, but the reality behind why it happens is more complicated than just crazy. I'm Ken LaCorte. I dug into the research to get to the bottom of this whole thing, and I'll share it to you as straightforward as I can. We'll first look at the numbers. How common is it really? Then we'll take a look at the psychological and other reasons why people get naked in public. We'll look at the fallout and the real cost to these events. And finally, we'll look at 5 kind of fun facts about public nudity. In just a few minutes, you'll know more about naked meltdowns than you ever thought you would. So buckle up and raise your tray table. Okay, so how often does this really occur? I see the clips all the time on social media, but is it actually common, or are we just caught up in the sensationalism of it? First, let's look at general problems on airplanes. The biggest surge in recent years in airline incidents, it wasn't related to getting naked, but about being required to cover up with masks. In 2021, the FAA reported nearly 6,000 cases of unruly behavior on commercial flight, the highest ever recorded. A lot of people hated mask mandates, they refused to comply, and they sometimes got aggressive. Still, even in that high watermark, there were 6.2 million flights total that year, so that's about 1 incident per 1,000 flights. And unruly doesn't necessarily mean a meltdown. It can mean anything from being drunk to refusing a flight attendant order and a whole lot more. Okay, so after the pandemic, things cooled down and we're now back to around 2,000 to 2,400 unruly cases a year, and a lot more flights. Essentially now, we have one problem every 8,000 flights. Personally, I've probably flown about 1 million miles, and I've never seen any unruly passenger who required arrest or even an intervention. And even among those incidents, they estimate psychotic breakdowns at under 1%. And the FAA, well, they don't even keep track of naked events because the numbers are just too small. Searching news reports, it's kind of rough to figure out, but the best I could come up with was maybe 1 or 2 per month in the United States. But there's a huge amount of flights. During a typical month, there are 87 million passengers taking a commercial flight in the United States. You're way more likely to be struck by lightning than ever see a naked meltdown. But if these meltdowns are so rare, why does it feel like we're constantly seeing them? Well, because we do, because they go viral. I mean, if you're yelling in a super memorable way, or you take off all your clothes, you're gonna get some clicks. And literally every passenger now has a high-quality camera in their pocket. So something that once would have been witnessed by a handful of travelers can now be seen by millions within hours. And finally, our brains are wired to remember extremes. And public nudity, it definitely counts. Okay, so what's going on? Why do people get naked when they're having a breakdown? When someone strips down at the airport, some people blow them off as trying to get attention. But when you look into it, you'll find out that it's a lot more complicated than just someone trying to get noticed. Let's start with mental breakdowns. Losing your clothes during a psychotic episode, it's not about attention. It's about losing every sense of social inhibition and being divorced from reality. Jason Russell was a filmmaker who spearheaded the famous PR campaign against Ugandan warlord Joseph Kony and his use of child soldiers. Just after his documentary was released, he was filmed on the streets of San Diego. His family said he had a brief reactive psychosis brought on by extreme exhaustion, stress, and dehydration. He later talked to Oprah.
It's hard to explain if people who've never had an out-of-body experience, but it really wasn't me. When I look at that person on the street, I see someone alone. I see someone who is totally out of control.
When someone's experiencing a severe mental crisis, their normal social filters disappear. The usual feelings of embarrassment and shame, they're your prefrontal cortex at work. And during a crisis, it's usually not. In those moments, they've often lost touch with reality itself. Multiple police reports and eyewitness accounts say the same thing. These people don't even seem to know that they're naked. They'll walk down airport concourses or city streets undressed, shouting and completely indifferent to their surroundings. The Journal of the American Academy of Psychiatry and the Law notes that disrobing during psychotic episodes, it's often misinterpreted as lewdness or exhibitionism. But experts stress it's not about sex or shock. Their brain's ability to judge context, interpret social cues, and suppress impulses, it simply breaks down. Sometimes it's more related to hallucinations and delusions. They might think their clothes are crawling with bugs or contaminated with poison or controlled by sinister forces. Removing their clothes isn't irrational in their world. It feels necessary and protective. In 2016, fashion model Kit McLean stripped naked in Times Square, climbed onto a ticket booth and started shouting. He later said that during his manic break, getting naked felt like the most safe and honest thing he could do. His manic mind read those huge Times Square billboards as messages telling him to undress.
The Express Yourself ad was playing, and I took that as a subliminal message to undress and express myself and protect myself from this danger by being completely nude.
That's how distorted reality can become. Another woman described tearing off her clothes because she believed invisible surveillance devices had been sewn into them. She was fighting an unseen enemy, and to her, being naked was safer than staying clothed. But mental illness alone doesn't explain every naked event. Another factor can be drugs, specifically drugs that make your body temperature spike. Ones like PCP, meth, or bath salts, they can send your internal thermostat into overdrive, leading to hyperthermia. The sensation, they say, is unbearable, like you're literally burning up inside. Police have seen it so much they've coined a term for it. They called it excited delirium, although it's a bit controversial among doctors. In this state as well, stripping down isn't just irrational, it feels like survival. Clothing becomes oppressive, suffocating, even painful. Police reports nationwide regularly feature stories of suspects, often on PCP, who not only strip naked, but exhibit bizarre strength and high tolerances for pain as well. It's a dangerous cocktail of confusion, overheating, and paranoia that rational minds just can't really comprehend. So overall, stripping naked in public usually isn't about getting attention. It's about something deeper and often much darker than exhibitionism. Okay, so when someone strips naked and screams running down the aisle, what's the real fallout? First of all, for airlines, money. If it's in the air, a crazed passenger isn't just embarrassing, it's expensive when the plane's forced to divert and land somewhere else. A small local diversion can cost an airline tens of thousands of dollars. More severe ones can cost upwards of $250,000 when they have to pay for fuel dumps, compensating passengers, flight crew rest limits, and more. It's a logistical nightmare, all because one person snapped. The FAA sometimes fines unruly passengers, a few hundred cases a year, and airlines can also issue lifetime bans, even if the mental breakdown was temporary. Typically, though, police treat naked meltdowns as medical emergencies, not criminal acts. A manic episode or a drug-induced psychosis often leads the offender to a hospital, not jail. But empathy only goes so far. The woman who ran wild naked through Dallas-Fort Worth Airport, she stabbed passengers with a pencil and bit the restaurant manager. She ended up hospitalized, but was also arrested for assault. Look, I dive into topics like this all the time. If you appreciate real breakdowns without sensationalism, this is a good time to hit subscribe. Okay, so we've talked about naked breakdowns in airports, but public nudity isn't always a mental health crisis. Sometimes it's symbolic, sometimes it's strategic, and sometimes it's just weird. Let's take a look at 5 facts I found. Maybe fun, maybe just interesting. The first one isn't a surprise, but deserves a mention. Protesters love to get naked because they know it will get them news coverage. PETA, the animal rights group, they practically perfected it, stripping down to protest fur, leather, and pretty much anything else animal related. Feminist protest groups, climate organizations, and plenty of other groups I've never heard of have all stripped down to get attention. There's a long line of artists, protesters, and eccentrics who've used nudity as a message because nudity says, pay attention. And if you're younger than me, you may not remember that during the 70s, naked people kicked off a whole streaking craze. No protest, just to liven up events from ball games, even to the Oscars.
And someone, quite likely,
Streaking in sports is still around, although I noticed that most of the time they're still closed, but unfortunately, not all the time. Ancient Greece. In classic Athens, nudity wasn't a taboo, and male athletes competed naked in the Olympics. It wasn't a pervy sideshow. It was a sign of discipline and honor. In fact, the word gymnasium comes from the Greek gymnos, meaning naked. The idea was that training without clothes showed mastery over both the body and the ego. Showing skin meant you had nothing to hide physically or morally. Okay, San Francisco, of course. You can still be naked there, but only on certain days. The city banned public nudity in 2012, but it carved out a huge loophole. If you're at a permitted event, you're in the clear, as long as you're not aroused. So if you're feeling inspired, you can still let it all hang out at the Folsom Street Fair or the Beta Breakers race. Just don't get Too excited, even California draws the line somewhere. Okay, so here's a strange one. Some people who are dying from the cold actually take off all their clothes right before they do. It's called paradoxical undressing. As the body loses its last stand against the cold, the blood vessels that were constricted to protect it, they suddenly open up. Victims feel like they're overheating, even though they're still freezing to death. Rescuers sometimes find bodies partially naked in the snow, which certainly first led to some grim misunderstandings. And finally, warriors. They sometimes have used what you might want to call tactical nudity. The Nordic berserkers were said to have charged into battles naked, howling like animals. The idea was psychological warfare. Shock your enemies. Show them you fear nothing, not even a sword to your body parts. You get the idea. Celtic warriors and some African tribes did the exact same thing, using nudity to display courage, spiritual power, and really just screw up the other side. Okay, so that's all the naked news I have for you today. But the next time a friend mentions a video of a crazed naked person running through the airport, you've got something interesting to say. Okay, so now on a more serious note, I recently produced a video about COVID. Years after it killed millions of people around the world, it's become more and more clear that it leaked from a Chinese lab. And it's no surprise that the Chinese would lie about it, but the real shock is how our own medical establishment and our own media went along with the cover-up until they couldn't do it anymore. Thanks for flying with me. Come back again.